Boker Tov, Rabbi.
All right. All right. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Pesachim Daf Gimel. We began almost the entire Daf on Daf Beis. We began the Masechta with various, I think we had 11 different proofs back and forth concerning the initial understanding of the machlokes between Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda as to what does the word oir mean. And as we explained, that we are trying to prove that not only does oir sometimes mean night, but when a Tana uses the word oir to a day, it always only means night. And we're going to have in the beginning of Daf Gimel another 4 proofs that oir means night. And it's not that we will refute Rav Huna, but the Gemara is going to actually tell us that we have a different understanding in what Rav Huna meant. And that's going to lead us into the sugya of using a lishna ma'aliyah. In other words, the importance of using refined and positive speech. We will learn, because of that, another counter value. Sometimes they contradict each other, about the importance of a person being mishto'ei b'loshen ktsara, the importance of using a more concise expression, a more bekitzadike expression. And the reason for that is that when a person uses less words, it's easier for the Talmud to retain that which he or she learned. The more you talk, the harder it is going to be to retain. And what do you do if you have to choose between one and the other? But these are 2 opposite competing values. We're going to have various stories on the Gimel Amud Beis that will demonstrate the importance of speaking in a refined language. We're going to have stories linked to that based on someone's behavior, one story won't be because of the language, but based on a behavior, it prompted the Chachamim to make an investigation. And weiter, we're going to have various stories which will show us, which will illustrate the importance of not stating not good news explicitly. Like when there's a passing, you don't have to be the one verbalizing that so-and-so passed away. There can be other means, other ways of communicating that, and a lot more. We left off mamish on the last few words on that Beis Amud Beis. Again, Meisvei Marzutra, on the initial understanding that Rav Huna teaches that the word oir means day, oir la'arba asar would mean, according to that in the beginning of the day of the 14th, in the morning of the 14th, you would make v'dikas chametz, and that cannot be the case. Daf Gimel. Now we are quoting here a Mishnah that we have in Kerisus, making a quick introduction to better understanding the laws of the Mishnah, as we learn explicitly in Parshas Tazria that when a woman gives birth, if she gives birth to a boy, for the first 7 days she's automatically tamei, followed by 33 days in which even if she sees dam, it's called dam toihar, it's called her yemei tahara. She does not become tamei. When a woman gives birth to a girl, for the first 14 days, everything is doubled. She's tamei. For the subsequent 66 days, those days are yemei tahara. If she sees dam, it's called dam toihar. So let's go to the max amount of time after a girl, which is a total of 80 days, right? 14 and 66. And then the Torah says that on the 81st day, she should bring a keves la'oila. This is what we have in Parshas Tazria. Oi, and then she should la'oila. Then she should bring a ben yoina, 1 or toir lachatas. And if she cannot afford to bring an animal for a carbon, then she brings 2 karbonos, the kan, echad lachatas, 2 birds, echad lachatas ve'echad la'oil. Now, what were to happen if a woman were to give birth during those 80 days? Now, obviously, it's a tragedy because a child cannot be viable in that little amount of time. Don't forget that after she gives birth, for the first 14 days, it can't be a relation. She's tummy. So we're speaking about a case where she had a relation. Biblically, she doesn't have to wait more than the 14 days. Today, the dinim are completely different. Today, a woman has to wait until she stops bleeding, and she has to make a proper hefsek tara, and then she has to wait shivas nekiyim. We're going dinei Torah. During those 66 days, it's possible for a woman to conceive, to be pregnant for 40 days, and God forbid, if she has a miscarriage, it's already viable enough, it's already 40 days, which is machayev for her to bring another carbon. So the din is that she doesn't have to bring 2 sets of karbanos. As long as she had her second birth within the 80 days, including even on the 80th day, since she was not even allowed to bring the karbanis for the first baby, so everything that she gives birth will be included in that pair of karbanis. Which let's speak this in a positive way. That means if a woman gives birth to twins when the Beis Hamikdash is going to be built, she won't bring 2 sets of karbanis. If she gives birth once and then she gives birth later, God forbid a miscarriage, she only brings one. A woman can give birth to triplets. A woman can give birth to 4 babies. She's going to bring only 1 pair of karbanis. On the other hand, if a woman miscarriages again on the 81st day, that means the time when she's allowed to bring a karban already came, even if she didn't bring it yet, but it's on the 81st day, no one debates that birth is machayev her, even though it's a miscarriage, but she was pregnant for more than 40 days, that birth is going to be machayev her to bring another set for the baby. That's also, no one debates that. The question that we have, the machlekes between Shammai and Hillel, is what were to happen if this woman, God forbid, miscarriages, and the words are, oir l'shmoinim ve'echad. Must mean the night going into the 80th.
Rabbi, it's miscarries.
Miscarry. If she miscarries, the night going into the 81st. Now, on one hand, it's already the 81st day. The calendar day is the 80th. More than that, the dinim of dam toihar, that if she sees dam, she's tohar, after she has an akeva, after she has a girl, ended at the end of 80 days. Or as far as calendar day is concerned, as far as the dinim of dam toihar versus now she's back to her normal dam tame, dam nida, the night of the 81st and the day of the 81st is the same thing. On the other hand, you can argue that since she's not even allowed to bring a karban because karbanis are only brought during the day, so she's still within the time of the chiyuv of the first karban. So maybe she should be exempted from that first pair also for the second baby. That's the machlekes. Let's read it inside. Hamapelas la'oir shmeinim ve'echad. So by Shammai, they are of the opinion that poitrin mi karban. She does not have to bring another karban for this miscarried baby, because like we mentioned, since she had that child during a zman that she wasn't even potentially able to bring the karban for the first baby. So therefore, it is included in the karban that she'll bring b'yom shmoinim ve'echad for the first baby. It will include the second one. And they still are machayv and they still hold that no, that oir l'shmoinim ve'echad is like having a miscarriage on the 81st day, where l'kula alma, this woman is going to have to bring now, not only for the first baby, a karban, again, really it's karban noise, but we say many times, b'lashon yachad, a karban, she'll have to bring another karban for the second as well. Then, Amru beis Hillel beis Shammai, ma'ishna oir shmoinim ve'echad, miyam shmoinim ve'echad. Why should it be different? And that's point number one, as the Rishonim explained. By Yidden, it's a calendar day. By us, a calendar day begins from the night prior. So she entered the 81st day. Number two, that's a number two. Im shiva loyla tuma lo yishva loyla karban. Furthermore, as far as the dinim of dam toyer is concerned, when does she exit the time where the dam still allows her to remain a woman that's tohira? That's after the 80-day finished. Once she goes into the night of shmoinim v'yachad, she exited the time, the yemei tahara. Not the 81st day in the day, already the night going into the 81st day. So therefore, since the night and the day are the same, Beis Hillel argues that it should be just like she gave birth to a non-viable child on the 81st day, and again she should be chayiv now for this baby another set of karbanis. Now we're not quoting what Beis Shammai responded, but the point here is that the Ka'amar says the Gemara, Beis Hillel Beis Shammai, Ma'ishna oir shmoinim v'yachad, miyoim shmoinim v'yachad. Clearly, the word oir must mean night going into, and not the daytime. Is indeed Shema Mina. That's today's first proof that oir means urtahu, that oir means night. Indeed, Shema Mina. Weiter, as we explained yesterday from the Rabbeinu David, that the reason why we have to have so many Shema Minas is because when Rav Huna said, at least our initial understanding, that oir means day, it's not that Rav Huna was denying the possibility for oir to mean night as well. The initial understanding is that Rav Huna holds it can mean this, it can mean that. But when you bring so many braises or mishnayos, works of Tanoim, where every single time oir means night, then it's a big doichik to say that punkt in our Mishnah it means day. That's why we need to bring all of these proofs. Next, number two, Shmeisvei. Now we're bringing a braisa. Like we mentioned yesterday, Alpin Nigla, one of the reasons why Pesachim is B'lashon Abim, right? Sukkah, Masechta Sukkah is not Masechta Sukkos. It's not Masechta Yumois or Yamim. It's B'lashon Yachid. Pesachim, B'lashon Rab, Al Pi Nigla, is because there are two separate dinim in Pesachim. You have the dinim of Chametz Umatzah, and then you have dinim of Kachim. You have dinim of a Korban Pesach. So here, let's start learning some dinim of Kachim. Korban Shlamim, aside of it being Kachei Kalim, has the unique long time in which you are allowed to finish consuming the carbon. So there are parts of the carbon that go on the Mizbeach, Achilas Mizbeach, you have Achilas Kohanim, by a Korban Shlamim, you also have Achilas Ba'alim or Achilas Bailim. How much time do they have to eat it? So normally the time is Yom Balayla, Dafka Day by Kachim, Halayla Hoylach Achar HaYom. Shlamim is unique. Not all Shlamims. A carbon Toida is also day and night, but a general Shlamim, it's called Shnei Yomim Balayla Echad. But it's not in that order. It's the day that you bring it, the night, and the following day. So says the Braisa, you might think that Yehi Nechol Oir L'Shlishi, here clearly, Oir must mean the night going into the third day. That maybe Shlamim not only can be eaten 2 days, but Shlamim should also be allowed to be eaten for 2 nights as well. And why would you think so? Vidinu. There's a logical reason. What's the logical reason? Zvachim, my friends, this Zvachim is referring to a carbon toida. There we know ne'echalim liyoim echad and shlamim ne'echalim l'shnei yamim. So now let's make the following logical comparison. Ma'alahalim when it comes to a carbon toida. Laila achar hayoim, a toida can be eaten 1 day and 1 night. What's pshat? The day that you shecht it and the following night. So Afkan, the fact that Hashem allows you to eat shlamim on the second day, so l'chura, you should also be allowed to eat it the night following the second day, which the Braisa is calling oir to the third day, which means the night going into the third. Afkan laila achar hayoim. Here you have the raya, but let's finish learning the Braisa. So Talmud Loimer, the Torah says, I'm recording a pasuk in Parshas Kedoshim biyoim zivchachem yei ochel umi machras. Now, the pasuk reads, and when you have a classical Torah Shebal Peh, very similar later in the later generations, what many people call the Hasidic Torahs, where they take a pasuk and they cut it in the middle and they make a drush. This is the Torah Shebal Peh. So you stop after the words ayim. And what is that alluding to? If you didn't eat it the first day and the first night, and yes, God Almighty gave us another day, it's only ad yoim. During the second day you can eat it, but the oir shlishi. Again, clearly the oir shlishi here must mean the night going into the third. Now, let's keep on reading the Braisa. Yachol, now you would think Yisaref miyad, that right after nightfall, if they did not finish consuming that carbon shlamim, it has to be burnt, which that's the din. That number one, we may not leave leftovers. But if there is noisa, you have to burn it. So maybe burn it right away. And also here, also the dinu, that would be supported by a logical, by the following logic. That's zvachim, again, going to atoida. Nechalim liyoim v'layla, echad. Shlamim nechalim l'shnei yomim v'layla, echad. And my lahalan by a carbon toida, take of lachilas reifam, burning immediately follows the time of eating. That's the din. No, it's liyoim v'layla. And if you did not finish consuming the carbon toida the next morning, right away you are obligated to burn it. So Afkan, you would have thought, take of la'achilas reifam. So if you didn't finish consuming the shlamim on the second day, the moment it's night, you have to burn the leftovers. The Talmud Loiman. V'hanoisan mipsar hazevach bayoim ashlishi ba'esh yisarev. Bayoim means during the daytime of the day. Bayoim ata soirev, if you learn, or you have the other girsa from the Maseiras Hashas, b'yoyim ata sorfei, and v'i ata sorfei balayla. End of Braisa. So now we're going back here also. The Tana is using the word oir as to the night going into the third. That you would think, that's the Havamin of the Braisa, that you can also eat it oir l'shlishi, that's the first part of the Braisa. When we see the first white line, that oir urta, and again, indeed, shma mino. And further, Tashuma, that's going to be today's third proof against our understanding of Rav Huna.
Amen.
We're going now into we're going back to Masechta Brachas. How geschmack is that? Just a quick review. Remember, on Daf Chav Ches, Daf Chav Tes, and Daf Lamed, we learned the whole sugya of what we call a Tefilla Me'ein Yud Ches, which is also called Havinenu. and there is an abbreviated or an abridged way of including all of the middle 12 brachas, not the first 3, not the last 3, but the middle 12, now the middle 13, in one bracha. And we learned in brachas is whether you are allowed on Motzai Shabbos, that we have to add Havdalah in the Shemona Esrei, aside of making it later ala kois. Can you add it in that bracha? The reason, the side that says you may not, is because let's go to the words 12. Initially, it was only 18 brachas. So the first 3, the last 3, then there's the 12 in the middle. If you abbreviate the Havdalah, you know what it would sound like? Well, for the first bracha, you make an abbreviation. For the next one, you make an abbreviation. Havdalah would be an abbreviation. The listener would erroneously think that this is really a bracha for itself. You're being makatzer all the brachas, you're being makatzer the Havdalah. So that's why we have a shita, as we'll learn, that no, Motzai Shabbos, you don't have an option of abbreviating the Shemona Esrei. You have to say out the whole lengthy Tefillas Yudches, which is anyways what we do nowadays. But let's go to the Braisa. Tashema. Oir shel Yom HaKippurim. Oir here must mean the night going into. We call that Kol Nidrei night. In the Braisa, it's called the night of Yom Kippur. So how many tefillas do you have on the Shemona Esrei? Mispal al Sheva, which is the rule for Shabbos and Yom Tov. The only exception, right, is Rosh Hashanah. We have to mention Malchus, Achrenis, and Shoifres, but otherwise you have the first 3 that are always the same, the last 3, and then you have the middle bracha. So it's 7 brachas, and on top of that, on Yom Kippur, in each Shemona Esrei, you say Vidui. Shachris, likewise, Mispal al Sheva Misvadeh, Musaf Mispal al Sheva Misvadeh, Mincha Mispal al Sheva Misvadeh, Ba'arves. And unique is the night of Yom Kippur, Motzai Yom Kippur, that people are hungry. So that's a reason to allow you to daven a shorter tefillah. Indeed, this Tanach holds, Mispalol me'ein shmoina asar, you are allowed to say the abridgment form of Shemona Esrei, known as Havinenu. However, Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel says, in the name of his forefathers, whether it is in the name of Gamliel or in the name of his Gamliel and Gamliel's father Zayda, that what Mispalol Shmoina Asar Shleimos. No, you have to spell out, you have to speak out the full Shemona Esrei. As we explained, that sugya we had over there in Daf Chavtes. And why can't you make an abbreviated form? You could, but again, that was one. I think it was Talmud Rabbeinu Yoina that we don't want for people to think that this is really a 13th. Like everyone, you're being makatzer Havdalah. It's not that. Havdalah has to be included in another bracha, and we include it in the bracha of Choinen Hadas. Bottom line is, the Braisa begins with the words Oir Shel Yom HaKippurim. So Alma, we see over here that Oir Urtahu Shma Mina. And now finally, the final one, today's final one, the 4th one that we're learning, Toshima. Either we're quoting a Braisa that was learned in the yeshiva of Shmuel. Others have a girsa that this Braisa was learned in the yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael. That Leile Arba Asar. This is Moedidik. B'chlal, my friends, the Rabbeinu HaKadosh, who compiled the Mishnayos, left out whatever he left out, the works of the Tanoim that were left out, even though that they are really, the Remez at least included in the Mishnah, but they were later written out clearly in what we call Braises. Now, Braises means Toseftes, Braises goes to Midrashim, Braisa means outside the Mishnah. So we have a Braisa that, and the Braisa is always a bit more elaborate than the Mishnah. The Braisa that is continuing elaborating our Mishnah writes, this is not what we learned yesterday, another sheet of Rabbi Yehuda. No, this is our Tana. The Braisa is wording it more elaborately, more clearly, spelling it out that it is the night of the 14th year Boidik Techametz Lo'ed Haner. Alma, clearly, this Braisa again is just elaborating our Mishnah. And the Braisa is using the words the night, Leilei. Alma, we see that Oir Ortahu, parenthetically, you see over here the way Ravina and Avashi were Masadr the Gemara. In other words, if the goal would have been to get to the point right away, then they would have quoted this proof right away on Daf Beis, and it would have had, God forbid, a one Daf less. But that's not the point. The point is to teach us how to learn, to review different works of Tanoim, to introduce all of the beautiful dinim that we needed to introduce. And now that we already refuted it, now we're coming back and we're giving the checkmate at the end. And indeed, the Gemara says that this is such a strong proof, especially the last one, it can be, and again, there were times that Amoraim were not familiar with certain braisos, but the Gemara is not going with that. The Gemara is saying, Oy Bazoi, Rav Huna never meant what we thought he meant. Ella, Bein Rav Huna, Bein Rav Yehuda, the Kula Alma. In our Mishnah, they knew that Oir means Urtahu. Oir means night. Veloy Pligi, and they don't even argue. Eloma, Marki Yasrei, or Marki Yasrei, meaning each one spoke the way people used language in their locale, in their location, in their place. Ba'asrei de Rav Huna, in the area of Rav Huna, Karu, they would call night Naghe. That word was used for night. And Ba'asrei de Rav Yehuda, they would teach the word oil as night. And now the Gemara asks the simple question. The Tana did done, my Tama like Tani Lele. Why didn't the Tana write clearly? Now, before we go on, as we just to chazar what we said yesterday, that even though Ba'asrei de Rav Huna, right, they would use the word oir for night, but just to make something very clear. Why didn't they use the word laila? And the answer is because oir means in the beginning of the night, not the beginning of the night by bein hashmashos. Beginning of the night can mean seis hakechavim, but as we all know, that even when it is halachic seis hakechavim, I'm not speaking about the Rabbeinu Tam, I'm speaking about what we paskin, the basics. Seis hakechavim, the heavens is not completely dark. There is still a little bit of light in the horizon, especially if you look at the west where it's sunset. And that's taka da halacha, that b'dikas chametz, it's not any time during the night. B'di'eved, any time during the night. But all of the dinim that we are obligated to make b'dikas chametz right away when it gets dark. Similar, like for example, the dinim of lighting Hanukkah candles. There are many dinim that just because you can do it during the night, here, b'dikas chametz, oir means when it's still a little bit light. It's seis hakechavim. Because you have to do it immediately with all of the dinim that you're not allowed to learn something that drags you in. You might spend too much time learning. You can't have a meal. All of the dinim are things that you may not do until you do b'dikas chametz. But now again, the question is, why didn't the Braisa say the word night? So the Gemara answers, and that opens up the second topic of today. Lishna ma'al yohu de nakat, that the Tana Dafka uses refined and positive speech. A person should never use a coarse, articulate a coarse expression. Now, we're not saying that night is coarse, but if you have an option of using the word laila, darkness, or oir, light, what is more refined? What is more upbeat? Oir is more upbeat. And there's many layers to that. So again, the Braisa did say leile because leile is not a davar meguna. But what is even more refined? The word oir. Shaharei ikem. Where do we see this from? Shaharei ikem. Hakos of shmoina ois is the Torah deviated. Deviated means the Torah added 8 letters in order not to speak out a word that's meguna. What is the word that we're talking about? It's the word of tamei. And as Rashi points out over here, as the Gemara points out on Amud Beis, it's not that the Torah never uses the word tamei. There are times that the Torah says the word tamei. As we'll learn more, there's a counter value. Many times you have to speak precise. But there's another value of not speaking something not positive. And where do we find that? The first source is from Parshas Noach. Shenemar, as it says, min habehema hatohira umin habehema, the Torah could have said hatimeya, 5 letters. Instead of saying hatameya, the Torah says asher eineno tohira. If you count all these letters, you'll see that there is an 8-letter addition by writing that's not tohira, instead of by writing hatameya. Rav Papa says, I'll find you a better source. Where the Torah adds is ikein, it deviates by writing 9 letters. Shenamen and Parshas Kiseitze, that kiyeh b'cha'ish asher, the Torah could have said, it could have said, Kibacha'ish Tamei, finished. What does it say instead of Tamei? Asher lo yeh toir mikro laila. Now, if you count these letters, here you got a little bit of a problem, because the additional letters, if toir is written with above that it is, then you have yourself 10 letters. But since toir could have been written without above, So you have a minimum ikim of 9 letters, and Avina says more than that. De facto, the Torah writes the word Todd, the Meluya, with the Vav, count. Instead of writing Ish Tamei, see Tamei and Asher, it's a wash, 3 letters and 3 letters. You'll see with the Vav, you have yourself 10 letters. Rav Acha bar Yaakov Omar, I'll find you another place. Taka not in Torah, but in the Nevi'im, where the Torah was Ikem, in order to use, instead of the word Tamei, but to say not Tohoy. Where do we find that? By Shmuel. It says that Ki Omar Mikrohu. This was an incident has occurred. Bilti Tahiru. Not Mikra Tamei. Verstehst? Mikre Tamehu. No, Mikrohu. Bilti Tahiru. Ki Loi Tahir. You'll count the letters and you will see that there are 16 additional letters. Tanya, Devei Rabbi Yishmael. A person should always use refined speech. Sharei bezav karoi merkav ubeisha karoi maishav. So not only did we have the opportunity to chazer some laws of kachim, let's go now to some laws of tahara. What do we learn in tahara is that we have certain people that are tamei, that convey tuma. Normally, when you convey tuma, the tuma goes down 1 notch. So if you are an av, that which you have halachic contact with becomes tamei on the level of a rishon. However, there are certain exceptions where a source of tuma conveys tuma that the recipient now is just as tamei. The mekabel is just as tamei as the mashpia. And one example would be that if someone is a zav, or if a woman is a zava, if they sit on something that was meant to be sat upon, or if they ride upon something that was meant to be ridden upon. So for example, if you sit on a saddle, or if you sit on a chair, that item, even if there wasn't physical contact, since your weight went on it, it becomes tummy on the level of an av. Now, whenever we are learning about the dinim of a man sitting on something that was meant for him to be sat upon, we mentioned at least many times merkav. The Torah uses merkav, riding, which is a saddle. By a woman, the Torah speaks about these dinim not by speaking about a woman riding on something, because really a woman riding meaning that she has a leg on one side of the animal and the leg is on the other side of the animal. That's not something that's that modest. So we don't even want to speak about it. Now, there is another way for a woman to go on an animal, and that is if she can sit and both of her legs on the same side of the animal. So she's sitting. So the fact that when the Torah is speaking about the dinim of merkav, it only links it to a man. And when the Torah is speaking about the dinim of moishav, the Torah associates it to a woman. The emes is that it's both the same. If a man sits on a chair, the chair becomes Tommy Moishav. If a woman does ride while she is a zava, the saddle will become an av. But the Torah doesn't speak it out. That's his proof that you should always use a refined language, but that is not enough, as we'll see in a moment. Ve'oimar is whenever a braisa or a tana needs another proof. I have another proof. And it says in Iyuv, ve'tivchar loshen arumim, that you should choose. Arumim here means wise. Sometimes arumim is a negative, like the Nachash was arum. But you should speak the language of the wise, meaning clean language, lashon, refined language, positive language. And v'oiman, yet a third pasuk, that v'da'a sefasai barur milelu. Wow. Why do we need to have to? My lips expressed refined language. Gavin, the master of this, Mamish, was the Rebbe. Amazing. Everything people did on Chab, everything was positive. And if it was not positive, it was called not positive. It was never called negative. Now, why did you have to have here in this Tanach of Rabbi Yishmael 3 psukim, 3 proofs? That's called Maiva Oimer. If he only would have brought the first about that the Torah doesn't use the word merkav in association to a woman, I erroneously would have thought Hanamil B'dai Raisa. In other words, when we have in psukim in the Torah has to speak b'lashon nekiyah. But maybe even when the Chachamim are teaching Torah, aval b'derabbanan loy. So Tashema, another pasuk, v'oimar v'tivchar lashon arumim. And maybe if you only would have had 2 sources, you erroneously would have thought, when you have to always use refined language, at least when you're speaking Torah, you're not speaking scripture, but you're speaking the Rabbanan. Hanamil b'derabbanan. But if a person is speaking b'milah da'alma, then you don't have to make that effort. 3 lines from the bottom. No, va'oimar or tashema va'oimar. Das fasai barur mi leilu. My lips express always refined knowledge. Hold on. The Torah never uses the words merkav. Ubeishu like sivba merkav. No, we just had this on Parshas Chayesara. V'atokam Rivka v'na'a roiseha v'tirkavna ala gemalim. So the Gemara says, no, hold on. We don't say a woman writing when indeed her writing is considered not so great, not that sanua. But whenever her writing is completely justified, then there's nothing wrong mentioning a woman riding on an animal. When is it justified? Did you ever ride on a camel? Many people go to Eretz Yisrael. For some reason, there they ride on a camel. Riding on a camel is not like riding on a horse. It's more frightening. The advantage of putting one leg on one side and the other leg on the other side is you get to chop onto the animal, not only with your hand, but also with your legs. Hassan, mishum bi'asusa di gemalim, then urchahu. And if it's the urcha, if it's considered okay, then there's nothing wrong mentioning it. It says, vayikach Moshes ishtoi vesbanav, vayarkivem ala chamoir. Here it's even worse. If you're saying that a gamel is more frightful, more scary than a horse, a donkey is even lower. So avada l'chu'ura over there should not have been a writing, and therefore why do you mention it? So answers the Gemara, Hassan, Dav Gimel Amud Beis, bishum banav urchahu. Like Rashi says, that the writing refers to her sons. Azoy zakt Rashi. Bishum banav, the top Rashi, Shem Zecharim, is kasav loshen rechiva. It says regarding Abigail, this is while her husband was still alive. Eventually, David HaMelech married her. But there was a time that David HaMelech wanted to punish her husband, Naval. And she went and she wrote to David HaMelech on a chamoir to ask David to forgive her husband. So the Gemara says, there also the writing was okay. It wasn't Heipach Hatznius, because Mishum Biyasusa Delilah, when you write at night, here also you are more secured when you ride an animal. So urchahu v'iba yisema that mishum biyasusa delaila lek. It's not a sufficient reason to ride an animal. But mishum biyasusa the David, she was also going to speak to the king. So that in itself brings about fear. So together with the fact it was at night and she's going to speak to the king, she had a fear which justifies. It's not considered not positive for a woman then to ride the chamoir. And the Asusa, the David in itself, together with the night, is also not sufficient. But there was another knech, which is Mishum Asusa Dahar. She was riding down a slope. So in that case, you put them all together, their riding was not considered something not sonua, and therefore there's nothing wrong. It's not going against, you have to speak Lishnama Aliyah to mention, as it says, that that Abigail was Reicheves ala Chamor. Now, this is the big question. If this would be the only value, a hard and fast rule, you never say tamei, say ki loy tahir, loy tahira. But that's not the reality. The Torah says clearly many times the word tamei. And that's the emphasis is because we have a competing value. And this is something part of life. It's not so simple. If you have a competing value, then you have to figure out which one will trump the other. What's the competing value? So here we go. Elo says the Gemara another rule that kol heicha dechi hadadininu. Whenever, let's say, the more coarse and the more refined language are ki hadadi, they are of the equal length, then the rule is, so then speak the more refined language. Mishtoi b'lashon nekiya. However, kol heicha denefishin milei, wherever the refined language will demand of you to use more letters and words. Now I know that we just learned on Amud Aleph, not so we'll get to that in a moment, but that's the general approach. Then the counter value will trump. What's the counter? What's the other value aside of speaking b'lashon nekiyah? To always mishta'e b'lashon kitzara, to always use a more concise expression. As we mentioned, that the benefit of concision, a good rule, guys, is that a short text is more readily retained. You'll remember it better. And we want for Torah to be retained. So when a teacher uses less words, he's helping his Talmud. But on the other hand, sometimes using less words will mean that he has to use a lashon that's not nekiya. So be it. Generally, if you have to pick between these two, More precise is more important than Lashon Nakiya. So when they're the same, always say Lashon Nakiya. But if that would be the case, the Torah a few times has to show us that there is a value of using Lashon Nakiya. So the Torah makes an exception. Now, why did the Torah make an exception exactly in the places that we had on Amud Aleph? That's the big topic of all of the Darshanim, why that's the exception. Look in the Marsha over here, it's Moededik. But the general rule is there's a chashivus in Lashon Nikiya, there's a chashivus of Lashon Kitzara. If you have to pick and choose, use Lashon Kitzara. Speak kurz und zum Zach. Kedavar Amuna Marav. Amri Law, that this was said by Amar Afuna Amarav in the name of Rabbi Meir. Wow, going back to the times of the Tanoim. That Lo Oilam Yeshane Adam L'Talmidoi Derech Kitzara. You should teach in a more concise manner. And yes, and more concise is saying Tomei and not saying not to Hoiram. Says the Gemara, hold on, but if it's the same, that's already clear. If it's the same, then for sure there is a value of speaking more refined. It's amazing how we go from Lashon Nakiya. Now, Lashon Kavod, it's all the same. It's a more respectable expression. Again, it's not black and white. There's so many layers to what's considered less refined, to more refined, more respectable, more positive. But for example, in the pasuk that we quoted on top of the summit of Avigail, the Torah uses the word, she was roicheves. Now, the word yoisheves and roicheves have the same amount of letters. And yet, the Torah says roicheves. Now, even though we explained that there is nothing immodest in those circumstances for her to ride the chamoir, but yet, why don't you write yoisheves? It's a lashon nikiya. So the Gemara answers, now look inside the Nach. Recheves is not written mitavav. Recheves is written without a vav. Yosheves is written with a vav. So if we were to choose the lashon nikiya, then it would be the opposite of derech kitzara. This is the great example that if you have to pick and choose, use that which is shorter. Derech kitzara. Recheves is kitzara. So Tosfos was asking, what are you talking about? Just like Recheves is de facto written on Avav, Yesheves can be written without Avav. Look inside the second place. It's in Taimar, Lichtav Nami Yesheves. So, Oimari, the Leimatzi Lemichtav Yesheves. Can't. Because the Cholecha, the Chsiv Yashav, Beloy Vav, every time Yashav is without Avav, it comes to teach you something. And there's nothing here that the Pasuk is coming to teach. In other words, you have to know the Emesid, the Lashon HaKodesh. Yoshev is with Avav. If you take the vav out of the yoshev and you put a choylem, then you're doing something that's an anomaly. Roichev could be written without a vav. Dig, weiter.
Rabbi.
And Tadas and Abyssal dig, doesn't get better.
Rabbi,
yes.
Just to circle back, when we said before, we said mina behema, mina tahira, mina behema asher einena tahira.
Yes.
How do we reconcile that with what we're learning right now?
So Rashi writes over here about that I just mentioned that the I and Amud Aleph we learn scenarios where the Torah is ikeim hakasuv, because there has to be some place or some few places where the Torah emphasizes the importance of speaking b'lashon nikiya. Why there? Again, there's so much to talk about. It's getting late. We're not done. It gets better and better and better. It's moededik. Weiter. So now that we mentioned this concept of the importance of speaking b'lashon nikiya, now we're going to learn about a few stories. And there were consequences. That means when a Rav saw that a Talmud who could have chosen a lashon nikiya used a lashon that wasn't as nikiya, they said, there's something not kosher over here. Hanutrei Talmidei that were sitting in front of the great Rav. Rav gave a shiur that was so moededik that they became tired. They became tired from their mind became tired. So Chad Amar, one told the other that Shavisinan, Haishmaitza, that this shiur, this study made us kidavar achar misankan, like a tired davar achar. Davar achar, that's again a lashon nikiya. Chazal, because of the virtue of speaking lashon nikiya, whenever there's something that they don't want to mention the peh, one of those things are a chazar, a pig. I'm just saying it to teach it, to be clear. So instead of saying a pig, you say a davar achar. So he didn't even say a pig, but he was alluding to it. He says now, for some reason, when a pig gets tired, it's like, wow, it's tired. So he says that after such a class, I feel like a tired davar achar. Now, the other one also acknowledged that shiur was so amazing that it tired them out. But instead of him using the davar acher as an example, he used a gedi, a goat, a kid. That study, this shiur it made us like gedi misankan, like a tired gedi, like a tired goat. Now imagine the layers to this. So he didn't even say the word chazak. Fakert, the whole concept of saying the word davar acher is not to say it clear. Nevertheless, Rav was upset at the Talmud that used the davar acher. Why didn't you use a gedi? Rav did not speak. I don't know for how long, but there was a while that Rav ignored the first Talmud. Another story, similar. Hanu, today Talmidei Havi Yosef Kamei Hillel. They were sitting in front of him, and one of them was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. However, other people say that the same story happened by two Talmidim sitting in front of Rebbe, that's Rabbeinu HaKadosh. One of them was Rabbi Yochanan. Here you can see how there was a confusion, because it was either, the Talmud was either Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai or it was Rabbi Yochanan. And here they were learning about the following, Nachad din in Taharis. What's the din, my friends? Let's go back to Tumah and Taharam. Even when you have a source of Tumah, in order for that to be able to convey Tumah to something that is growing from the ground to produce, the produce is only susceptible to becoming tamei with number one, it has to be cut off the ground. When it's mechubar lekarka, it will not acquire tumah. Even after it's cut off the ground, it has to become muchshar lekabel tumah. How does that happen? Yat shachadam, there are 7 halachic liquids. And if they become wet, not just becoming wet, but it has to be beratzin haba'alim, chiyitein, kiyutan, with all the dinim that we'll learn so many times together, God willing. But if the product becomes wetted and the source of tumah touches it, then it becomes tamei. So now here is the question. When a person is going to be harvesting grapes, so the Mishnah tells us that if you don't want for the wine and for the grapes to become tamei, make an effort that all of the kalim should be tahor. Because if the kalim that you use will be tamei, being that it's common even before you have a final product, when you're just harvesting the grapes to take it to the wine press, some of the juice of the grapes will ooze out. That is considered halachic liquid. And not only is that halachic liquid, but that liquid is on the fruits. There's a certain amount of contentment of the owners, especially when you're taking it to the wine press. So he's happy it's already oozed out. He already has some liquid. So if the kalim will become tamei, then the grapes will become tamei as well. So therefore, the Mishnah always speaks about the importance of being boitzrin b'tahara. Boitzrin is the word that we used for harvesting. In Lashon HaKodesh, in English, harvesting is for everything, I think. But in Lashon HaKodesh, every product has another name used for the harvesting. So when you harvest grapes, you're boitzed grapes. When you harvest olives, you are moisik. By olives, even though when you harvest olives, yes, some liquid oozes out of the olive, but that is not halachically called mayim. It's not halachically called shemen. Halachic shemen is only when you squeeze the olives, not like grapes. By grapes, even the liquid that oozes out is already considered yayin. So since it's not considered a halachic, one of the 7 liquids, even if the kalim are going to be tameim, it won't be able to be metama the olives because the olives were never muksher lekabel tumah. I gave you the answer, but this Talmud was asking, why is it that you find that by boitzrin, we have to do it betara? Have to mean if you want to make sure that everything remains tahoira. But the ein moiskin betara, by olives, we don't care if the kalim are tamei. Why is that? We're not quoting the answer. We just gave the answer. But the point is that when they asked the question, what did he say? He said, the ein moiskin betara. He didn't say you're moiskin betuma. You don't need to be tahar. Again, he said it in a lashon more nikiya. The chad amar bepnema boitzrin betaro moiskin betuma. So Amar, whoever the teacher was, whether it was Rabbeinu HaKadosh, whether it was Hillel, he said muftach ani bazeh, that the one who didn't say the words tamei, the one who said not tohira shemoira hoira b'Yisrael, that he'll become a halachic decisor. He'll become a poisik. Because my friends, to be a poisik, yeah, you have to know dinim, but most importantly, you have to be a God-fearing person. And when a person is a God-fearing person, that reflects in the way one speaks. So someone who has a more refined speech, that's an indication that this person has a greater amount of Yirah Shamayim, and that's exactly what we need to be a Paisik Dinim. Oh, And indeed, beautiful. Another story. Hanu Tlasi Kahana. There were 3 Kahanim. Bizman Abayis. Every Shabbos, in the middle of the day, before Musaf, they would at the same time put on the new 12 lechem apanim breads, take off the breads that were sitting Melafanai Tamid, and they would divide it both amongst the mishmar that's coming in, both amongst the mishmar that is going out, and every client would get a certain amount of the lechem apanim. Now, when it comes to eating normally means you're eating a kazayas or more. By kachim, generally, the mitzvah was not for the kahanim to eat. The mitzvah was, like we learned today on Amud Aleph, not to allow any noiser. Not allowing any noiser means that if you have a carbon and you divided it amongst the kahanim and no kohen got any chash of a piece, everyone got a little nothing. But as long as the carbon was completely consumed, the mitzvah was done. And indeed, many times, in order to afford more kahanim with some little piece of the Eibishter Shirayim, people got small pieces. And here you see a story of everything is perspective. You can have 2 people getting the same amount. If you're machshavit, if you're happy about it, to you it will appear like you got something big. If you're not machshavit, you're going to complain. You're going to think you got a little portion. And also, if a person doesn't normally use lashon nikiya, so then the examples he or she will use will be of something that's not nikiya. And that's what happened. There were 3 kahanim. And again, they all got the same size. But I got the size of a bean. A bean is very small, very small. And the other one said, Higiyani Kizayas. You see 2 people, he felt like gypped. And the other one was so happy, wow, I got like a Kizayas. And the other one, who also got a small amount, not only did he express himself, so to say, that, I got such a little piece, but he used the following a mashal. He used the following analogy. My piece of the lechem apanim was kizanav hal ta'ah, was like a lizard's tail. Probably, when you break a challah, he got a elongated, skinny piece. So it's not only that he was kvetching on the little amount that he got, but he compared it to a zanav of one of the shiratzim. And they said, oh, that's not good. That means there's something we have to look into. And Batko Achta, they looked into it. Shemetz pasul. Shemetz means a genealogical psul. Genealogical psul means that he was not even really fit to work in the Beis Hamikdash. Now the Gemara goes until we got the point. But hold on, we have a kasha v'ha. Either Tanya, we have in the side Tanan. We learned a rule in Kedushin that ein boit kinim in amazbech olomaylo. Once the Sanhedrin would make sure that every client working was checked into, and once they determined that he can go into the Beis Hamikdash, right? We learned in Talmud, they would wear white garments, they would make a simcha, and you never have to be boidik. So how did they even have the right to go again into his genealogy? So the Gemara says, no, you have to change the version. Like Tema Shemetz Pasul, they didn't find something that was wrong, that he was a chalol because something of his father or grandfather. Ela Ema Shachatz. Shachatz means that because of him being haughty, it's a chutzpah to look down at Kachim. So they noticed that there is another haughty behavior. And what is that? So Rashi reminds us that we learn in Menachos that if a kohen says that there's even only one part of the avodah that is beneath my dignity, he's not allowed to do any avodah. Kohen would say that if they're very gaivadik. So they saw him acting with gaiva, so they looked into him and they discovered not about yichus, that he is also not being machabed some other detail in avodah, and because of that, he's not fit to do any of the avodah. Let's go back to the first. When do we learn that ein boitkin min hamizbeach ulamayla? If nothing happened, that it's called there was no new red flag. But over here, since the ihu the ara nafshe, right, he compromised himself by using a not lashay nikiyah reference to kachim. So here, you can go into it again. It's like when you do a shidduch, all of the bedikas you do before the shidduch. After the shidduch is done, then what do you look into? But if after the marriage, this guy or this woman is doing something really not that good, then people, that's a pattern. Then they start making a bedika. You look again. Right. Another story. Now this story is not about lashon nikiyah. It's beautiful to see the flow. But now that we had a story where because of someone's behavior, here it was a verbal behavior, that instigated an investigation, now we're going to learn other such stories. not the negeh lashon nikia, but how one's behavior will prompt a investigation. Hahu arama'a, a Aramean, a non-Jew, the Hava Solik v'achal Pesachim Yerushalayim, that he, knowing that the Torah does not allow for a non-Jew to partake of the Korban Pesach, by my friends, Goyim can bring Karbanos, with many details that can't enter beyond the Chayil, but Pesach, the Torah says, right? Chol ben necher lo yochel boy, and the Adul cannot participate. He knew that, and he wanted to, he outsmarted, Rabbi Leib Shapiro, my Rosh Yeshiva, says a person came to a town, and he says he fooled the whole town, even the Chachamim. How did you fool them? His name was Moshe. He told them the name was Yankel, and he fooled everyone. He fooled everyone. How did he fool everyone? He told them that he's Jewish. This is a very important sugya. There's a Tosfos here about this. Taka, when a person comes and says, I'm Jewish, does he have automatic nemanis or not? Now, obviously, it depends for what. Is it for a minyan? Is it for a shidduch? Is it for an aliyah? But this is a very important source. Obviously, when he came, they believed him when he said that he was Jewish. Okay, and he went to a Pesachim, and he says, Amar. Now, this Amar was, as we'll see, he was conversing with Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Rabbi Yehuda ben, we'll learn a Tosfos in a moment. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira had a halachic justifiable reason not to go Aliyah's regel. This happened not that long before the Churban Bayis. This is a Gavaldic story. We're going to quote the Gemara in Gittin Nun Vav of Zechariah ben Avkulas. Let's go over here. So he told the Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, says in the Chumash and Parshas by Kol ben Nechar lo yochel boy. It says Kol ora lo yochel boy. You know what? I outwitted all of the priests in the temple. I ate from the best of the best. Now here he already gave an opening. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira explained that the Rishonim understood from him. Why did he boast he ate from the best of the best? He thought that a goy can participate, but the goy cannot eat from the best part. So for him to show that he fooled them, he needed to emphasize, I ate from the best part of the korban. So now, as it says in Tehillim, im chasid tis chasod, im ikesh tis patol. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira had the right to outwit him because he was acting wrong, so he used that against him. Amar later, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, you think you ate from the best of the best? I'm sure they didn't give it to you. You fooled no one. Miko safalei ma'aliyah, did they give you from the tail? Now the tail, right, not of a goat, that's gone. The tail of a lamb, we'll learn this in Kachim, is part of the chaylev. It's never consumed, but it is the fattiest part of the animal. Oh, so they never gave it from the tail. You fooled no one. And for the Amalei, so he said no. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira tells him, if you go there again, you'll see. Give me from the tail. And they won't give it to you. You can't fool anyone. That was just tricking him. So Kisalik, when he went again, he told the people in the Beis HaMikdash, Ma'al Yosafalu, feed me from the tail. So they told him, how can a person like you in your age, don't you know Aliyah Ligavoya Salka, that the tail should be put on the Mizbeach? So they asked. So that statement prompted an investigation. Made it worse. So he says, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira never would have told the Yid to ask for something that's against halacha. So they said to themselves, "My high the common was tutzach da." Batku, they made an investigation Basrei about this person. And they found out that he's not Jewish. The Armahu. And what did they do? Vikatluhu, they killed him. Guys, remember the story when you learn Gittin Nun Vav. Mamish similar. That by Zechariah ben Avkulas, right? That he was matal mum in the korban, and they wanted to kill him. Remember? So Zechariah ben Avkulas says, people that will watch will say that whoever is matal mum b'kachim should be killed. Don't kill him. Don't kill him. Don't bring the korban. In other words, are you chayiv misa for this? Generally, no. But under these circumstances, they knew that if he's going to come back to his city, this is before the Churban, and he's going to say that he wanted to participate, and we were not ecumenical, and we were racist, and that would have caused the Yidden so much trouble that it would have risked their lives. That was that much tension already. Himamish lived. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira lived in the times of Rabbi Akiva. He lived in the times of the Churban. So they felt under that circumstance, no one can know what happened then, and they killed him. Oh, and here's the Tosfos, Ma'aliyah Kosafel, the second to last Tosfos. So Tosfos asks, what was Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira? Why wasn't he there? Let's finish reading the Gemara and then we'll learn the Tosfos. So Sholchalei, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, they were so happy they sent him back. Shlom Lach Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Peace upon you. Da'at v'netzivin You are in Etzivin, but your net is spread out all the way to Yerushalayim. Your Chachma protected us here in Yerushalayim. So says Tosfos in the middle that Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira shaloi ol regel. Why wasn't he there? So Tosfos says either because he owned no property. This is an important halach. If you own no property, you're not mechoyev aliyas regel, or that he was very old. And most importantly, Tosfos here proves that Nitzivin is not part of the Holy Land. Now, it doesn't mean that you have an option. Every Yid can go, but if you don't live, you're not mechuyev to go. Put it all together. He lived chutz la'aretz, adjacent to, but halachic chutz la'aretz. On top of that, he was probably a choila, and therefore, what he was unable to go with his feet. And aliyas l'regel ideally should be done with your feet. There was a chassid of the Alter Rebbe that went every year to the Alter Rebbe by foot, whether it was to Liyazna, to Liyadi, and when he got very old, he was unable to go by feet. So his family told him, so go to the Rebbe on Yontiv on a wagon. So he says that he feels that the biggest chus he has in his life is that he always went to the Rebbe for Yontiv. And when he's going to come to the next world, if the horse will take him there, he doesn't want to share the merit metaferd. If he can't go beregel, he's not going. No, it's here you see the same concept from the Gemara. You remember say that when he was a chayla and zaken, he was unable, Tosfos says, to walk, so he felt he's not going to go. Okay, weiter. Let's chaparayim another few lines. Back, guys, now we're going back to restrained speech. Rav Kahana, Chalash, Rav Kahana got ill. Shadru Rabbana Rabbi Yeshua Bereid Rav Idi, the first white line, they sent him, and they told him, Amrullah Zil Bedoik, my Dina, go find out what's happening with him. He was really ill. And sadly, when Rabbi Yeshua Bereid Rav Idi got there, Ashkechei Denach Nafshe, he found that the great Rav Kahana had passed away. So Kaidam call, what happens? Karei Lelavusha, he tore Kriya. But if he was going to return with his rent garment in front of his heart, everyone would have seen immediately that the great Rav Kahana passed away. And like Rashi says, sometimes you don't want to break bad news in a shocking way. You do it slowly. So va'ahadre lekare la'achoyre. He shifted, he turned his jalaba, they were ropes, kapatas, he turned it in a direction that when you would look at him, you wouldn't notice the tear. But he couldn't contain his tears. And fakir, that's the slow way. So he was crying. It could be because he was very sick. And then they would see that he read kriya. Ubachi ba'asi. And Amru lay, so they asked him, Nach nafshei, you're crying because he passed away? So Amar Lahu, so he told them, Anoloy kamina, I never said that. As it says in Mishlei, Umoitzi diba, that the one who utters an evil report, even if it's emes, Huksil is a fool. That's part of Lashon Nikiyah. You don't have to shear the bad news. It should be understood by itself. Another story. Yochanan chaku koha. Either Rabbi Hananel says it means he was Yochanan the scribe, or Yochanan from the city, right? From Neville, from the city of Chakukah, that nafak likiriyas. He went out. The people that lived, let's go in the city of Chakukah. They owned lands out there in the villages, and they made their livelihood by planting. And they always wanted to know, how are the crops? So he was the shliach to see how is the produce of that season. So Kiyasa, when he returned, so they want to report, Amru lay. So they asked him, Chitim nasum yafais. Oh, did the wheat grow well? They were all partners there. So instead of him telling them, no, it's a horrible harvest, b'chachma, not to share bad news. Amru Lemi told him, so oirim nasu yafais. The barley is very well. They understood. In other words, the wheat is not well. So Amru lay, so they were upset at the way he responded. And they told him, barley is food generally given for animals. So they told him, you're coming and telling us about the barley? Why are you telling us about the barley? Tell the animals who eat the barley that they had a good harvest. Say, be mevaser ubisar, not basar. Go and notify to the Tzusim and to the Chamoidim, as it says, that the Hasiyoidim, barley and straw, is losusim, are meant to be given to horses, vilorechesh, and to animals that ride very quick. In other words, they were not happy that he said that the So'oidim were very good. But the Gemara says, the last line might have a little name, but what should he have done? In other words, he was correct in not saying, oh, the wheat was very bad. You don't say that. He used chachma. But they were upset at him because he should have used another example. So answers the Gemara that ishtaket, havalela meimer, he should have told him, ishtaket nasu chitim yafis. Last year, the harvest of wheat was good. that would have been a wiser way of sharing bad news, so to say, indirectly. Inami, he could have told them regarding that year that the adashim, lentils, are also eaten by people. They had chitim, they had lentils, that was the Metzias. He should have told them adashim nasayafais, but generally this concept of don't share not good news explicitly, all part of speaking B'lashon Nekiah, a lot more to be continued. Yasher Koyach.
Jalaba.
Thank you.
Great daf.
It's easier than
Thank you, Yara.
Shkoyach, Rabbi.
That was a good one.